Very happy to um, be here today and have the opportunity to share some knowledge that I've received from my teachers and knowledge that I've gathered over the years working with many, many patients and clients, and knowledge from my spiritual teachers also, which has been the greatest blessing of all. Um, so today we're talking about mental health, which is sanity through connecting to the qualities of the soul. This is an essential topic because um, if we start out the discussion about mental health and well-being and forget or ignore, you could say, uh, the most fundamental and important aspect of ourselves, of our very selves, then it's a little bit like the man looking for his keys under the streetlight. And when asked, where did you lose your keys? He said, they're in the backyard. Uh, and they said, well, why aren't you looking in the backyard? He said, well, because there's no light in the backyard. I'm just looking where there's light. So it's a little bit like that, where if we're looking for help in the wrong place and we keep digging and digging and digging, it's like digging a hole that goes nowhere. So we have to start out with a basic understanding of who we are, what is a human being, and what is our greatest potential as a human being. And only when we are moving in that direction can we actually um, expect to have some degree of uh, peace, of sanity, what to mention, lasting happiness and mental health. So there's a lot of different ways that we can come at this topic. But first, I'd like to just start with a very basic understanding of the anatomy of a human being. And what I mean by that is a way in which we all function in a similar, that we're all made up of similar stuff. And there's many angles of looking at that. So one very simple way of looking at it is in terms of the mind, and we as human beings, that one of the truths is that we exist. So this is a way in which we're all similar with all other beings. We all exist, we all have awareness, and we all think. We all have thoughts. So we exist, we have awareness, and we all think. So that being the case, everyone is the same as far as that goes. And the what we are thinking creates feelings, and feelings often create actions. So it's a very simplistic way of looking at things, but it's important because the idea is that our thoughts are like a part of a camera projector. And based on what is inside our thinking, we will create the movie out there. We will create a film out there. This is called projection. But we're doing it all the time. So just the simple awareness is that my thoughts, what I'm aware of and what I'm thinking, are actually creating my experience in the moment is actually very simple but revolutionary, because we can be upset with somebody or something, and all of a sudden we can know that, oh, actually it's my thinking that's causing me to be upset. Because how much of the time is our thinking even accurate about what another person is thinking, about what another person is doing, about what a potential reality might be if we're worrying about something? These are our thoughts, and we're creating so many pictures and so many realities. So the first thing, and this is very, very basic, is to understand that we're projecting so many things on the screen of life based on our thoughts. We exist, we're aware, and we think. So that's a foundation. So let's go a little deeper now. So there are, many of you might know, the qualities of the soul. There's also the three modes of nature. the gunas, as we say. So let's first talk about the qualities of the soul. The soul is an eternal, as my teacher called it, an anti-material particle made up of pure consciousness. It's one with and different from the Supreme Soul. And the analogy that we give is like the sun is the Supreme, and the particles of light emanating from the Supreme are us, the Jiva, the soul, the Atma. And what is that Atma made up of? That Atma has three basic qualities: Sat, Chit, and Ananda. So Sat means eternal, but it also means ever present. That which is eternal is also ever present. It exists. Sat is the existence potency. So our capacity to be, to exist, is Sat. Sat also means truth, because truth exists. So that which is Sat, our soul exists. We exist. I am that I am. We've heard that before. Okay. And I am eternal, or I am ever present. Chit means awareness or consciousness. Ultimately, that awareness leads to knowing our true divine identity. And Ananda means bliss. Another way of putting it is the soul by nature is that part of us that has to do with being, knowing, and loving. Being, knowing, and loving, or life energy, light energy, and love energy. So the soul, Sat Chit Ananda. So unless and until we can move in the direction of becoming aware of our true nature, then it's very difficult to expect that we can attain mental peace, contentment, and ultimately happiness and mental health. So we're starting from a general perspective, and then we are going to get into a little bit more fine detail. So Satchidananda. Now, so the soul by nature is not contaminated, as it's explained in Bhagavad Gita. It can't be cut. It can't be destroyed by fire. It can't be wet by water. It can't be burned. So it can't be destroyed. It's eternal. It's Sat. However, just like the sun can be covered or obscured by a cloud, in the same way the soul can be obscured by the clouds that are in our thoughts and in our consciousness. So then the question is, what do we do with those clouds? And like I mentioned before, those thoughts are projecting so many images onto the screen of our consciousness, which is kind of like the movie screen of our life. So now let's touch on the three modes of nature, because that has a great impact on the consciousness. So when the mind and consciousness, or you could say the clouds that obscure the soul, the true nature of the soul, are imprinted or contaminated, you could say, with the modes of nature. The first, the most dense mode, of course, is tamagun. Tamagun, one definition is ignorance. So what is ignorance? When we ignore what is. So when we completely, the more we ignore Sat, what is actually existing in truth, the more ignorant and dense the consciousness becomes. The happiness level of when the consciousness is obscured by tamagun is very, very limited. The happiness that comes there is either completely diluted, like a drunk man, thinking that he's a millionaire when he's lying on the street, or somebody who causes suffering to another living entity and gets pleasure out of that. And of course, that pleasure is very, very limited, and it's very, very short lasting, because if someone gets pleasure from causing harm to a person, then they have to go find another person or living entity to cause harm to. It's a very, very dark form of happiness. But as one of my teachers called it, negative pleasure. There is some kind of perverted pleasure in tamagun, but nothing that lasts and always will bring misery and suffering. And then we have rajagun. Rajagun is much more passionate. It's the desire to fulfill desire, and typically our capacity to fulfill desires that are the flickering desires of the mind are coming from Rajagun. Excuse me, Rajagun makes it possible to take the actions in order to fulfill our desires. The problem is many of those desires, just like eating ice cream, you might eat ice cream and get some nice pleasure the first few bites, maybe even halfway through, but eventually the pleasure graph starts going down very quickly. And at a certain point, if we keep eating that ice cream, we become miserable, more miserable. Someone says, no, you have to keep eating, keep eating, keep eating. At some point, that same thing that gave you great pleasure becomes very miserable. So this is the nature of Rajagun. Rajagun can help us fulfill our desires, but they're also temporary. And then, of course, we have Sattvagun. Sattvagun is in the mode of goodness or harmony. And those pleasures are pleasurable in the beginning and pleasurable in the end. Sometimes, the things of Sattvagun, we may have to wait for the actual pleasure to come, because by being patient, something very good will come of it. So Sattvagun is very, very important for mental health, and this is why it's very important to cultivate activities, and we don't mean 24 hours a day necessarily, but cultivate activities that impact how these guns impact the consciousness. So if we can reduce Rajagun and Tamagun and increase Sattva, the nature of Sattva is peace, harmony, balance, and happiness. So one of the best ways to do that is how we eat, how we sleep, how we exercise, like that. So eating, very, very simple, eating more sattvic food is actually very, very important. And this is what we do when we're doing the Total Life Cleanse. Here in America, we have people do a program of eating very, very simply smoothies, khichdi, minimize or eliminate garlic and onion, eating much more sattvic. And people notice, even people who don't know much about yoga or Vedic philosophy or Ayurveda, they notice within days that their minds are more tranquil and more peaceful just by removing so many rich foods, so much animal products, very excessive spices, and so much garlic and onion, which are also very rajasic and in some ways tamasic. So we're changing the diet, eating lots of fruits, lots of veggies, eating lighter in general can be very, very helpful to minimize tamagun and rajagun and balance things out so that we have more sattva in our life. So this is a very general perspective, but without doing this and to expect that we can have mental peace and mental happiness without focusing on some of these things, then it's very difficult to imagine, or it's actually impossible to have mental peace and mental happiness when we don't acknowledge how these gunas affect the consciousness. So also, what's important is that when we acknowledge the qualities of the soul, Satchidananda, and we focus on practices that increase sattva. Sattva is very much in harmony with the soul itself. Sattva also contains the word sat, doesn't it? Sat means that which is, or truthful. So when we are living more in sattva, it's like an easy platform for us to move into experiencing the nature of the self. Again, that Satchidananda nature of the soul itself. So, and I'll touch on a little bit more of the spirituality that's related to that in a few minutes. Another very important thing is to look at what the goals of life are. The goals of life, we think of them as the 4 goals of life, but I like to add the 5th goal of life, which is prem, pure love of God. So the first goal we've heard of, many of you have heard, or perhaps not, but Dharma, Artha, Kam, and Moksha. So these are the goals of life that all human beings throughout all of creation at all times actually have, whether they know it or not. So Dharma is that thing, or that the quality in which something is always present. So the Dharma of fire is heat and light. The Dharma of water is liquidity. So what is our Dharma? There's different types of Dharma. The true Dharma, the eternal Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, is love. That is actually the nature of the soul, is to love and to serve. This is the true nature of the soul. So if we're doing that, or if we're moving in that direction, then we're moving in the right direction. But the Dharma also indicates, okay, so we have this temporary material body with different qualities. What are the qualities that I have that I can utilize and to be of greatest service in this life? So the Dharma is like, what is my nature, and how am I meant to function? Some people very much have the Dharma. They want to be protectors, so maybe they want to work in the police force, or like that. Some people by nature are very happy to farm. Some people by nature are very comfortable focusing on spiritual life. Some people are very expert in business. So acting according to our Dharma is very important because it's natural. And that's what makes it very, very important, is that um, as in the Gita is expressed, better to be yourself imperfectly than try to be someone else perfectly. We have to act according to our nature for the most part in order to be happy. And this is why in the Vedic culture, I know it still exists, but in the golden age of the Vedic culture, Vedic astrology and also palmistry was very, very important, because it helped to identify what was the nature of a person, and also letting the nature of the child unfold. I mean, maybe a child was born into a like a warrior or kshatriya family, but their nature was very Brahminical. So that person should be more of a Brahminical, or live a more of a Brahminical lifestyle, because that's their nature, and it can go in both directions. We shouldn't be held by our social status, external birth. It's according to our inner nature. So these things are very important to identify. And a good parent should try to allow the child to reveal their nature, so they can live according to the nature. They'll be happier and more successful in doing so, and whatever it is they're doing. So Artha also, Dartha, we all have the need for economic well-being, economic security, fulfilling our necessities in life. And some people may see their needs as being very vast and very great, and some people it's very, very simple. But according to what our needs are, everyone has the need to have enough food, to have a house, to protect them from the elements, to have enough money to feed their family and their children. So we all have these different needs. So satisfying that, calm, everybody, living entity by nature is a pleasure seeking entity. Everything in nature is seeking pleasure. And sometimes we go about it in very strange ways, and ways that seem backward, and they are in many cases. But if you really look at it from a broad perspective, everyone is looking for happiness. How they get to it is a whole nother question. So, but we all want pleasure, and pleasure that's aligned with our Dharma is appropriate. Pleasure that's completely unaligned with our Dharma is what gets people into trouble. So healthy pleasure is okay. Unhealthy pleasure causes mental dis-ease and agitation and suffering. And then we have moksha. Moksha is related to liberation. But let's take it down a couple levels here. Moksha is also, it's the inherent desire of the living entity or the human being for freedom. Everyone wants freedom. Everyone wants freedom. And sometimes that could be freedom from a tyrannical government. A teenager often wants freedom from their parents. It's the natural thing in the heart to want to be free. And ultimately, in the more spiritual understanding, we understand moksha to be liberation. Liberation means freedom, but liberation ultimately freedom from misidentification or freedom from the identification with the body, the mind, like that, and ultimately identification with the true self. So this is moksha. And then we have prem. Prem is obviously everybody wants love. And they've done studies, crazy studies, but hugging babies when they're born and not hugging babies when they're born, and tracking them throughout some years to see their physical growth, mental growth, and development. And the babies that were loved and taken care of and held and touched did much better than the babies that weren't touched and weren't held and weren't loved. So everybody's looking for love. So as we want love in family, we want love in friends, we want love from our parents, we want love for our children. Many people want some kind of conjugal love and relationship. And then also the living entity by nature wants to love, universally love all beings. And then we go to the greatest love, which is the love for the soul itself, for the divine. And this is actually, you could say, the ultimate freedom and the ultimate goal of the human being, because that love is the greatest and the freest, and it fulfills Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha completely. So praying, pure love, and ultimately pure love of God, pure love of the divine, is the ultimate love that fulfills everything. When that love is actually present, because it's blissful, it's completely self-satisfying. The heart, the self, is completely satisfied. The small self and the big self completely satisfied by that love. So without that, then our happiness can only be limited. And we can only grow as much as we're able to grow. Our heart can only open and heal as much as it's ready to open and heal. However, there are practices that we can do in order to prompt moving in that direction. Before I mention that, I do want to mention, and I'm covering a lot of different topics right now, but I'm trying to pull it all together, is that in Ayurveda, maybe you've heard the word pragyaparad. It means when we ignore our own knowledge, our own experience, our own intuition, we offend ourselves. Aparad means to offend. So when we offend our own knowledge, experience, wisdom, like that, we cause our suffering. And so in Ayurveda actually says the cause of all suffering is pragyaparad, when we ignore our own intuition, knowledge, experience, like that. So this is a big problem. And the cause of emotional wounds and imbalances are due to undigested experiences, or ama, right? So ama can mean undigested food, which becomes a toxin, or literally a toxin that becomes a toxin. But it can also be an undigested experience that can cause not immediately physical indigestion, but emotional indigestion. What is indigestion? Is when the food keeps coming up again and again and again and again. In the same way, if we have a very traumatic experience, if say a child is abused in some way, it's very difficult for a child to integrate, to digest that experience. Just like we eat something, we're meant to chew it. It's meant to go in the stomach and churn, and it goes into the small intestine, and the nutrients are absorbed, and that which is not useful gets passed on and eliminated. So in the same way, we're meant to have our experiences are meant to we're meant to have these experiences, learn something from it, let it go and move on. However, if something's traumatic enough, it becomes a big problem. And again, we can make a physical analogy. You eat a little bit of ice cream, no problem, you digest it. But if you eat way too much ice cream and just keep eating and eating and eating and ignoring your body signals of, I'm full, I want to stop, then that will cause a lot of suffering, a lot of physical suffering. So in the same way, if we have imprints of different types of traumas or sort of a continued type of stress in life, eventually becomes very difficult to digest that. So this is a whole area of psychotherapy, and also personal self-development, which is very, very important. And in Ayurveda, there's a quite a vast array of modalities to help us digest these things, anywhere from yoga, different types of acupressure, and talk therapy. There's different energetic techniques of visualizing previous emotional situations while you're keeping your eyes in different directions. There's different ways to help us using gemology, understanding ourselves better through astrology or palmistry. All these things, both internal and external, can help us better digest experiences. So, in a very simple way, if we have something that's really bothering us, it's good to talk about it because that helps us digest it, whether that's with a friend, a loved one, or a professional. It can be very, very helpful because it helps us understand it and digest it. Some things are so deep and so profound that we might need to go really deep or do certain techniques in order to sort of uncover some of these things that might be there. And those things have a way of impacting the thinking and the projector, and that's where the what we call the unconscious comes in, right? These samskaras that imprint the subconscious mind or the consciousness, they imprint the consciousness and create like a ripple on the consciousness and always create a certain type of disturbance. So by confronting these things, by looking at them, by being truthful, by being in sat with something, by becoming aware of it, we can then easily let it go and move on. The problem with modern psychotherapy or many techniques is going over and over and over and over the same story again and again. Then we become very identified with the story. We're not meant to become identified with, oh, that one time I had too much ice cream, so therefore I can never, ever, ever have ice cream again because, one time I ate a gallon and I got sick. Well, that's not true. You ate a gallon, you got sick, you learned that you don't need a gallon. I can have a small amount and I can be fine. So in the same way, we don't want to create grooves in our consciousness, reminding ourselves of these horrible stories that may have happened in our lives. The purpose of going over them is to look at them, to digest them, to assimilate them, to gather some wisdom and knowledge from those experiences, and then to let go. They're not meant to be gone over again and again and again. And if you're working with somebody, or if you have a therapist or somebody who constantly wants you to go back to that story, go back to that story, go back to that story, that person probably isn't serving you at this time. To talk about it in the beginning is very good, but to go over it again and again, because what we do is we create grooves in our consciousness where we're just stuck in a loop, constantly thinking about that particular event. And there's ways to clear it. There's ways to clear it rather than thinking about it all the time. So that's a very important point to understand. So now I've said a lot of different things. We've covered a lot of different angles. So again, coming back to the point of the soul, the nature of the soul being Satchidananda. And a very important point with that is that how do we connect? There's many different ways of connecting. Whether it's meditation, yoga, tai chi, chanting, kirtan, so many different modalities. Um, Even things like getting massage or acupuncture, things like that can put us into a very present state. But the principle that I think is very important is that whatever we can do to get present, to get our, I call it being in a state of beingness, of being present, of gathering your energies and allowing yourself to be, is very, very important, because that's the sort of the foundational quality of the soul, is the fact of beingness, of existing. If so, for example, if you're with a friend and your friend, is sharing something personal, and your mind is going everywhere thinking about so many things, and then you say to your friend, "Oh, I love you." That's not really love, is it? That's not being present in that situation. You could say is love. Giving your ear, being present, allowing yourself to slow down internally enough to actually listen to that person. So beingness energy is very important because it creates a foundation for presence, and presence is the foundation of healing. Without presence, healing doesn't happen, whether it's uh, healthy relationships or healing something that needs to be healed. Without being able to be present with it or with another, healing doesn't happen. Presence is the foundation of healing. It's like the bedrock of the soul. From presence, when we're more present, we can be more aware, which is also a quality of the soul. And if we're present and aware, then there's potential for contentment, peace, joy, happiness, even bliss, because that's the nature of the soul. So many people want to experience bliss through knowing. Many people want to express bliss through just by feeling love. But in one sense, the quickest route is to become more established in being present, because without being present, awareness and love are not possible. It's like a parent who, we feel this way with people, isn't it? You love someone, but are you willing to slow down and be present for that person? That's another level of expressing love, is being present. And that's where real healing and harmony comes in. So the form of energy healing that I teach, called Jivatma energy healing, I have a saying, I've said it already, presence is a foundation of healing. And it's all about um, learning to be present as a practitioner with the client or the patient as we go through the different energies and the different elements in that person, and we balance them out. And it can be quite remarkable what can happen in terms of healing when we give another person our presence and our energy in that moment. So it's a very powerful thing. So presence is a foundation of healing, which is also connected to the soul. I would say that whenever you're really present, you're getting very close to your own soul energy, to your own Atma energy. And by doing that, this is very, very good. Now, there's also a whole nother dimension, which is related to spirituality. And I'll just touch on that because, again, like I said in the beginning, if we ignore our our true self, then how can we actually ultimately be happy? And so this particular talk is more about mental health and relationship with the soul. And there's the line that I come from. I'm in the Bhakti Yoga tradition of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his disciple Sanatana Goswami asked Chaitanya, who am I? Why am I suffering? What is the purpose of life? And his first answer was a verse, Jivera Svarup Hoya Krishnera Nityadas, Krishnera Tatashta Shakti Beta Beta Prakash. And what he said was that you are, the living entity, is eternally a servant of God, a servant of Krishna. That's our eternal nature. And why are we a servant? Because we're dependent. We're dependent. Just like, so the analogy is that he gave also was the sun and the sunshine. The sunshine is dependent on the sun. As soon as the sun exists, the sun globe, the sunshine exists. But as soon as the sun globe doesn't exist, the rays are gone. So the rays are completely dependent on the sun globe itself. So the living entity, the soul, is completely dependent on God or on that supreme source, whatever, however you think of it, a source of all consciousness. And that source is also supreme Satchidananda. So we're little fragments of that. So when we awaken to our identity as being parts and parcels of that source, so the verse goes on to say, an eternal servant, a manifestation coming from what's called the marginal potency. That means the living entity. Our nature is divine, but we can become overpowered by the three modes of nature, by ignorance, passion, and even material goodness. So that's the situation of the living entity, is that we're divine, but because we're minute in some way, we can become overpowered by the three modes of material nature. And the living entity is one with Beta Beta Prakash, a manifestation which is one with and different from God. So we're both Satchidananda, we're both creative, we have many qualities that are completely one with God, but yet we're dependent. We're eternally dependent. We're a manifestation of. We're a Shakti of God. We're Jiva Shakti. We're the energy of God. So the idea is that when we start to wake up to that reality and do that practice or sadhana, that helps us to reawaken to our divine identity as part and parcel of the divine. Also, that starts to kindle and reawaken that potency of the soul, that beingness, that awareness, and that love potency, or Satchidananda energy of the soul. But it has to be done sincerely and with awareness, with love, and with a good amount of effort in order to do that, because the nature of being a human being in this world is that the mind becomes very, very, very distracted from our true nature. Okay, so we want to be able to reconnect to that, and this is a process of yoga. So these things are very, very important, and I hope I've touched on some of these things, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And all of this is in my book, The Total Life Cleanse. It's about a 400-page book, but it's written in a very easy to understand way. And I would just say in closing that having a desire to grow, to know yourself, cultivating that desire, to give up a tendency toward complacency, and try to find that part of you, that particle inside you that wants to grow, that wants to know, that wants to love, that wants to serve the truth, the sat of existence. This will bring satisfaction and happiness. There's always going to be ups and downs and bumps in the road, but as we connect more deeply and more essentially with our true nature, those bumps, we get through those bumps easier. And it's not, everyone in this material world is going to have those bumps, no matter who you are, from top to bottom. Even described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Brahma, the creator of this material universe, had his bumps, right? What to mention us, living beings in this world. We're going through some very, very challenging times on the earth in this particular age that we're in right now. So it's even more essential that we dig deeper into our spiritual roots. And anybody who has spiritual roots and knows what I'm talking about, if you've been a little bit lazy or lethargic around such things. Now's the time to dust it off and get back in the fight like Arjuna did in the Bhagavad Gita. He had to come out of illusion and do what he was meant to do. And we're also in the same situation in this world. We're meant to, to, as we say, sweep off the dust and get back to the business of being a human being, a spirit soul with a material body, and the human being. We have the greatest potential. We're very, very fortunate to have human form to understand who we truly are. And thus, in doing that, automatically we become happier, healthier, stronger, clearer, and we can have our needs met in this world, and we can also bring a lot of love and healing and blessings to the planet and those that need it most. So I'll end it here. Thank you so much. It was a great opportunity. I really appreciate you, those that have listened, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir. You have presented very well with that topic. And few things I would like to mention from your presentation. First of all, you have very well described the nature of the soul or the Jivatma, Satchit Anand. And you also talk about the main purpose of human life as per Vedic or the Vedic philosophy, that is Dharma, Arth, Kam, Moksha. Also, you introduced one, that is the love, or we can say that true or eternal love. It is very reliable to the, because without having a divine law in our life, whatever we want to achieve, whether dharma, kam, moksha, is not so much reliable. So thank you for introducing audience with this. You also mentioned a few approaches of Ayurveda, naturopathy, along with the mental health. That is also very inspirational, and also provide the approach to the other ones, that here is also tools for the mental health problems. And you also mentioned a very unique and very popular aspect of Prajya Aparadh from Ayurveda. It is also a cause for mostly problems of a human being. And you a very core element, or we can say uh, when you talk about the presence, you mentioned that presence is the foundation of healing. It is very important point, whether in our relationships, while dealing with the clients, or every field of our life, we have to be presence in the present. So presence in the present moment is very necessary. So thank you so much, sir. Now we would like to move or take some few questions from our audience side. What is the approach of Ayurveda about mind and the Ayurveda? What are the measures mentioned in Ayurveda for the treatment of mental problems?
Okay. So one of the first thing that comes to mind, there's many things, but first we have to look at our prawn. There's the prana, or prawn is the pivot point between the physical body and the mental body and the mind. So our prawn becomes disturbed in many ways, but we do know that if we can balance the five pranas in the body, then automatically there will be more mental peace. So there's there's breathing practices that will balance the pranas. And it's also known the five pranas are throughout the whole body, but they're also located in the heart. And we also know the mind is in the heart. So if the heart is peaceful, if the heart is happy, if the energy in the heart is moving nicely, then there will be more mental peace and mental happiness. So different things can infect the five pranas in the body. Literally how we breathe is really important. It's something that is underestimated. I'm possibly talking to an audience that is more aware of such things, but often these things are forgotten and they're minimized because of the emphasis that we're giving on external forms of happiness and external remedies. and drugs and medicines and things like that. So working with the breath is very, very important. Doing various forms of alternate nostril breathing like this can be very helpful for balancing the nervous system. But also what we eat can also affect things, because food itself has vital life energy in it. And if we're eating food that's very tamasic, very heavy, that will affect our prana. That will affect our body, which then affects the prana, like that. So our exposure to toxins, we want to minimize that. So if we are being exposed, then we want to do things to minimize that. Maybe take some herbs that we can do. So and then there are things that we can understand. What else is affecting the prana? It would be astrological aspects could be there. So if you have a good astrologer once a year, get a reading and get an understanding perhaps of what are the influences. Even working with certain gems, or like I wear a yellow citrine, this last couple of years, because it just sort of balances out my Jupiter energy. So there's things that it's helpful for. So all these things are really, really important. And the other thing is to understand how different emotions are affecting the different organs. So for instance, if we're feeling a lot of anger, we would want to purify the liver. If we're feeling a lot of fear, we might be having more issues with the kidneys. Or if we're having a lot of grief, that will ultimately affect the lungs. So these are all things that we can keep awareness of. And thirdly, of course, like I said, remember, digestion is a big issue. So if there's issues, first talk about it. I mean, keep it very simple. These days, everybody goes to healers and therapists, but it's also really good to have a friend that you can be very honest with.
How the naturopathic doctors deal with different problems and how it will be helpful in mental health problems. So kindly provide your
Okay.
experience, your advice to us.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give you a quick understanding would be, so for example, in both Ayurveda and naturopathy, there are many, many herbs that affect the consciousness. So, uh, some even herbs like bacopa, godokula, haritaki, are all very good for consciousness. Okay. So in Western medicine, we understand, most people understand, oh, there's something about serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, dopamine, GABA, norepinephrine. These are different neurotransmitters. Serotonin is sort of the groovy neurotransmitter, helps you feel calm, relaxed, quite peaceful. GABA helps you be very calm, meditate. Dopamine lifts the mood, helps you focus, more like that. So in up until modern psychiatry, they'll recommend medications that affect the chemistry very dramatically. But there are nutrients and there's herbs that also impact the chemistry, but in a different kind of way, because what they generally do is they're building blocks, and they help the body both make these chemicals, and they also help the body utilize the chemicals more efficiently. So rather than giving a chemical or tricking the body into thinking it has more receptor sites for something, or reusing the same stuff again and again, it's really tricking the body better in many ways to give the body what it needs, to remove some things that are interfering, give the body what it needs in the form of a nutrient or an herb, and often get really good results. Now, one of the things that people run into is that, well, the doctor says I only have to take this drug once a day in the morning, and the herbs I have to take 2 or 3 times a day, and it might not taste very good. Well, then we have to shift our perception. Do we want to do something that's more nature-based, more natural, more in alignment with prana, with vital life energy, that ultimately is beneficial and will actually nourish my tissues, nourish my brain, nourish my nervous system, or something that in time will have a negative impact? I'm not opposed to using medication temporarily. You know, I mean, there's a right use for it. There's no doubt. Just like there's a right use for surgery. The only problem I have with traditional or modern medicine is the inappropriate use of it. You know, if someone breaks their arm and they come to me for some acupuncture, I don't say, oh, no, it's okay. You don't have to go to the hospital. I say, no, go to the hospital. So, in the same way, but there are many, many cases where people, okay, I'm having a little mental disturbance. Let me go on this drug right away. Well, that's a big jump. Maybe a little bit of I can't focus. So rather than taking Ritalin or some kind of Dexedrine or some kind of speed, maybe I take a little bit of Bacopa or a lot of Bacopa or Ginkgo, get some more blood up into the brain and stop eating so many greasy, fatty, horrible things and stop drinking so much soda and so my blood sugar.
Or in a spiritual way. This is just limited to the lust or the physical attraction. So, in your opinion, how we can attain the true or the divine love in ourselves, and what is the difference between the love and the lust or the physical attraction? So, how we can differentiate it?
Right. Okay. Well, certainly, you know, love and lust is it's temporary. You know, we anybody who's been in relationship with anybody for a long time, it can be very. It, you know, you could once say it's nature. It's nature getting people together. You know, it's how nature works. Very. But now we're talking about the difference between love and lust. Lust is basically doing something for my satisfaction. Love is doing something for the happiness of another. So this is even in human ways. If we can be more selfless and be more giving, then we're moving in the direction of love. And ultimately, uh, when we are, then there's divine love, and divine love is always available. So it's the nature of the soul. The soul is called Bhav. This capacity for the soul to love God is a potentiality that is eternally exist in the heart of the soul or the heart of the jiva, and it's manifested in a heart that's been purified by sadhana, and generally also by the blessings of a person who is also in a state of consciousness that they have a heart loving relationship with God. So, this is something that first we have to understand I'm an eternal part of God. And then also we understand, okay, therefore I have a relationship with God. And now I'm choosing, because I understand this, that I want to make an effort to love God. And by doing specific practices to do that, to attain that realization, uh, the love that's already dormant in the heart begins to manifest. And that love is eternal. It's actually our true nature. It's our true love. It's not something that comes from the outside. It's in there. We just have to uncover it through our practices. So, and the love is not, it's not something that is very blissful and then creates misery. It's blissful and then more blissful and then more blissful. And then after that, it's more blissful. Because the nature of love is it's always expanding. It's not like I can say to someone, oh, I love you. Now I'm done. Done loving you. You know, I love you, so I'm done. No, love means growing, growing, growing. So the nature of divine love is that it's expanding and it's blissful and it's the greatest of all love. So,
Thank you so much, sir, for clearing this point. And now we will move towards your work, as you mentioned about the book 400 pages. I am just sharing your screen about your website, Healing Essence Center. So, sir, kindly introduce a little about to our audience. Let me share it to the screen.
okay. Great. Yeah, that's my wife, Catherine, and Healing Essence Center is the name of my business. And up on the right there, I think you can order my book if you like. So we have a center in Concord, Massachusetts. Uh, oh, you can feel free to go there. You can purchase my book, and we do acupuncture, Ayurveda, chiropractic, all types of healing there. And we also have kirtans and bhajans and all types of things at our office as well. So feel free to check it out. The book I know is available worldwide. different stores and Amazon, places like that. Feel free to check it out. It'd be wonderful if you did. It's
Thank you so much for your valuable time. You may proceed with your presentation. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Bye bye.